Seems like the Curtis fund doesn't end.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ascend Together Forum. I'm Mike G, National Program Manager at Ascend. If you're currently unmuted, please mute yourself. Thank you. Along with my colleagues, Robina Singh and Shamia Saman, we will be your technical facilitators. Before we get started, we would like to quickly go over some housekeeping and engagement guidelines. Today's program is being recorded and a copy will be available later this week. We're using the Zoom meeting format. We encourage everyone to turn on their camera. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. During the Q&A session, if you would like to ask questions, please use the raise hand feature. The chat function is also open to share your thoughts and comments. Please rename yourself to include the state you're joining from. If you're currently outside of the US, please indicate the country. A poll will be conducted shortly. Instructions to participate will appear on screen. We shared with you the Ascend Together Forum virtual background. We encourage you to use it to show support. Lastly, please engage with Ascend by sharing our social media posts and insights after this forum at Ascend Leadership. Before we begin, we would like to share a short video clip from Ad Council.
I believe the host can mute all. And Mike, you can.
I've heard people make comments like, thanks for bringing the virus over.
Didn't it come from you guys? A passenger told me that to go back to China.
I've had strangers cough at me.
People move away from me.
Someone spit 3 times towards my direction. I felt so violated. My biggest fear is that all the stereotypes that we've worked so hard to break are just going to be reversed. And I won't let that happen.
Everyone has to keep everyone else safe. We all have to play our part.
I've been spending 8 to 10 hours a day making masks.
I donate my plasma.
As an essential worker, I'm delivering food, groceries for my community.
I mean, I know I'm putting myself at a little extra risk. I'm happy to do it.
It's really hard to talk about racism when all I want to do is cry about it.
You have to talk about it to other people. You have to tell them these things exist.
We're all human. I'm a firefighter, not a virus.
I'm a mask maker, not a virus.
I'm a nurse, not a virus.
I'm a delivery woman.
I'm a rideshare driver.
I'm a chef, a neighbor,
Artist.
Bus driver.
I'm a doctor.
Fight the virus. Fight the virus.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome to our Ascend Together Forum. And today, we're delighted to have a conversation on how resilient employee resource groups are combating anti-Asian hate crimes. In the video we just saw, you can see some context of what it is that we have all experienced together. And both myself as well as all our colleagues at Ascend across many different industries and companies want to gather together to continue our dialogue so that we can raise awareness and purposefully move towards action. And so today I want to share some of the statistics and data that our Ascend team have put together. If we can go to the next slide. Today, we will go through this welcome section, and then we'll engage you to go through an audience poll, followed by a panel discussion and Q&A from you. And then we'll have a few facilitated conversations with audience members, followed by some closing remarks and call to action with some next steps. Next slide, please. For those who may be joining Ascend for the first time, Ascend is the largest nonprofit organization for Pan-Asian business professionals with the goal to develop Pan-Asian leaders to fulfill their full potential and make greater positive impact. Ascend is uniquely positioned to help us tackle some of these issues that impact our workplace as well as society at large. Ascend has been committed to serving employee resource groups and hosting these forums for many years. And we have year-round gatherings to talk about the resiliency of ERGs. In fact, many times during the national convention, for those who have attended, we have ERG forums specifically to talk about the unique value proposition that ERGs bring to their companies, members, and the leaders of those organizations. We'll also have these forums periodically to share leading practices, foster networking so that we can learn and help each other. Go to the next slide. So what brings us here today? What you'll see in the next couple of slides, if we can advance here, is that there is a disproportionate impact of the pandemic to the Asian community. And beyond what's on the slide, what I want you to think about is the fact that a lot of the Asian communities, as well as families, including mine, was disproportionately impacted from an economic standpoint because of the small businesses that are owned. You can see it's just a figure that 74% of Asian-owned businesses are operated by Asian immigrants. And if you think about what that means and the news that you're seeing in regards to anti-Asian hate, it means that many of them are on the front line. 4 in 10 Asian adults report that they have acted uncomfortable around them because of race, of ethnicity since the beginning of the pandemic outbreak. 58% of Asians say that anti-Asian attitudes and outbursts are more common than they were before. 25% of Asian workforce are in the service industry as employees. And the Washington Post headline from about 2 months ago specifically goes through a study that has found that anti-Asian hashtags have spiked after the previous administration had insisted calling COVID-19 virus using the term Chinese virus. This is not just something that's claimed. There is actually a research study that's been done. Go to the next slide, please. Some information from the Stop AAPI Hate organization have shown that over the past year, they have seen a spike of anti-Asian hate in many venues. It has happened online for sure, in public streets, the parks, and believe it or don't, in business places, places that you and I may have frequented or have worked. They come in different forms. Some people have experienced them as verbal harassment, online harassment, shunning. And sadly, there are also people who have experienced them in the form of physical assault or workplace discrimination or refusal of service. And so this issue has been a particular challenge for many of us, and I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to talk about how to combat that today. Next slide, please. Here's statistics that's even more alarming. Overall, in the past year, hate crime as a nation has dropped 7% in the United States. However, anti-Asian hate crime specifically have risen 149%. And so when we talk about the disproportionate rate of what the impact is for our community, I think this slide and the statistics has made it really starkly clear. Next slide, please. I'm glad that we're gathering for this conversation because Ascend has made it possible for us to gather and voice that were not bystanders. Sometime last year, we had an opportunity to create a 5-point action agenda to raise awareness, promote inclusion, denounce bias, support our communities, and give donations to support different organizations in this work. And Ascend has gathered over 110 different companies and organizations in this campaign, and many of them are attending with us today. Many of them represent companies that have joined this effort and foster solidarity and allyship among all of us. Next slide, please. And as a continuation, an Ascend Together forum like today is a safe space for us to foster honest and transparent conversation, for us to tell our authentic stories and educate many on our Pan-Asian experience and inspire actions. Recently, we held a forum on March 22nd that was attended by over 1,000 people. We also had done sessions last week with a group of executives, specifically talking about what executives can do to combat anti-Asian hate crime. Which brings us to today's forum. We have over 550 people RSVP representing over 200 companies and organizations. And during registration, many of you have shared tips and leading practices from your employee resource groups. And we look forward to sharing some of those and hearing your stories today during the Q&A portion. But for now, let's move to our panel. Next slide. One way to set up our panel is to talk about what we heard in the last forum. We did a poll, which we're about to do with you shortly, about one word that described how people were feeling during the Ascend Together forum on March 22nd. And you can see many of the words represent the emotions and the challenge that many of us who attended that forum were feeling. Let's see how people are feeling today. So if you wouldn't mind taking out your phone, it may be easier to do it that way. Text Ascend N800 to the number 22333. Or if you prefer to use your devices, you can use pollev.com/Ascend N800. One word that describes how you're feeling. Exhausted, enraged, tired, concerned, frustrated, disheartened, excluded, lonely. I see that in the chat window as well. Outrage, sad, pissed, fear. Many, many challenging words here. Disappointed, powerless, scared. I've used many of these words to describe how I've been feeling over the last 12 months. So I'm really grateful that you joining this conversation and sharing your thoughts. While I see a lot of really, really challenging emotions, I've also seen a couple that are positive. I saw the word determined was one of them. Motivated was another. And while things may be uncertain or discouraging, or you may feel invisible, there are also some of us who are very, very motivated to be here with you. I see the word supportive. I see the word encourage. I see the word hope. So thank you so much for sharing all these concerns and all these challenges. And I shared the word that's just been typed into the chat window that says hopeful. Ascend and the community organized by Ascend is what gives me hope for us to continue these conversations so that we can share with each other some of our tips and some of our resources to help us individually as well as collectively go through this journey and support each other. Will you go to the next slide? Before I introduce all our panelists, I want to share with you that after our panel and our Q&A, we'll also have 3 phenomenal facilitators that will facilitate conversations with audience members. Rush Reese, Elpa Suracha, and Jin Yang will be there with you. So think about your experiences and stories that you may want to share, and we will try to get to you during that portion. And without further ado, I'd like to get to our panel discussion today. My name is Michelle Ng. I serve as the Corporate Responsibility Leader for Financial Services at EY. I also co-chair our Tri-State Pan-Asian Professional Network based in New York. I'd like to ask our fellow panelists to introduce themselves. Mark B., would you like to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here to talk to everyone. I'm with For Our USA. I'm currently the Customer Marketing Manager over our convenience stores and specialty markets businesses. And I'm the co-founder of the Asian Employee Resource Group at For Our USA, former co-chair and just member at large now, but happy to be here.
Thank you, Mark. Next, let's go to Susan Gilbert.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Sue Gilbert. I am with the Coca-Cola Company. My day role is a senior commercialization manager for the Coca-Cola Freestyle business. I think the best way to describe that is if you've been in the market and you've seen those cool swanky dispensers, fountain dispensers that have the touch screen and the mobile pour capabilities on it, that is the Freestyle. I also have the privilege of being the president for the Asian BRG at the company.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sue.
Mm-hmm.
Next, Vivian Tsai.
Thanks, Michelle. My name is Vivian Tsai, and I'm with TIAA. I work in the division that oversees 529 college savings plans. And I'm also involved in TIAA's ERG and named Engage for the Pan-Asian community. I co-lead the communications effort across the organization.
Thank you so much. As you can see, our panelists represent different companies and different industries. So it's really incredible that they're joining us today. So to start us out, I want to talk about how ERG has helped play a role in enabling our Pan-Asian professionals to voice their concerns and their emotions about what's happening. And I want to turn it over to Vivian to talk a little bit about how you have found your voice with your ERG over the last few weeks.
I really have. And Michelle, you're so correct, because this really has been happening over the last couple weeks. Although I'd like to say that I feel like I've had this voice, and it's been my inside voice for my entire life. Born and raised in California, to China, an immigrant from mainland China, and a Japanese mother, and subject to all of the ridicule that I'm sure many of our peers are familiar with on this call. And over that period of time, with parents who believed very strongly in sort of doubling down on suffering through it, the Japanese word I call to mind is the word my mother used all the time, gamang. You just sit and be silent in your suffering, And I feel like that got the better of me over a number of years, because I can tell you, and my friends will tell you this, I've found my voice in many other areas, whether it's support for college education or get out to vote. But when it came to issues around anti-Asian bias and just involvement in the ERG, what really was the kick in the gut for me was earlier this year, vacationing with my college-age sons in a Midwestern state, and walking into a restaurant where we were very clearly the only minorities in the place, and having to wait for service, my son asking me whether I thought that we weren't being served because we were Asian. And that developed into a conversation over our dinner. I didn't believe that at all, and I told him that, but it was a fair enough question for him to be asking as a 19-year-old about to embark on adulthood. And I came back and I immediately reached out to our ERG, and I said, I need a forum, I need a voice, I need to share our experiences. And it was a big bucket of cold water on my head that made me think, shame on me for not being more of a voice earlier. But I shared with someone earlier, it took me a while, but I'm here, and now I'm ready to use my voice. So that was early days on how I use it, but this is going to be one of my my commitments. If not for me and you, for my kids.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing that experience. And Sue, I remember during our call, you also shared something about how you brought your son to an ERG event. Can you talk a little bit about how your ERG has helped your journey personally and professionally?
Yeah, so thanks, Michelle. Yeah, very similar to Vivian. I have two freshmen, a freshman in college and a freshman in high school, and they could not be more opposites. So, but, you know, for me, you know, early on, part of, you know, my tactic was just being very straightforward and kind of being very factual with my kids. My son had some experiences at a young age where he was trying to encourage, he was playing basketball, he's a baller, and was confused as to why, you know, the kids weren't passing the ball. So, you know, just had to kind of condition him really young and let him know that, you know, he's got a different background. He's going to have to learn how to work hard and build trust. So kind of tried to keep it on a positive front on building character, but I also, whether they liked it or not, being a BRG president, I enlisted them very quickly to be my date at some of the events. They've attended Lunar New Year celebrations, Diwali celebrations down at our corporate headquarters. Made them do volunteer work with the local tea walk, and then also had them involved in the Dragon Boat Festival. So, you know, as we were moving along this journey, you know, with him now, my son in particular being in college, you know, you don't realize at their young age that as much as you like to think that it's different from our experiences, no matter what their background is, these kids are still navigating to figure out who their authentic self is. And I just think that these events and the things that we've done were the tools to put in his tool belt to help him find a way to be comfortable in his own skin. So my daughter is the same. I've made her attend a couple of the celebrations, but you know, my children are biracial. So it's funny because my son favors me, but my daughter looks very Caucasian, but she will, you know, not hesitate for one moment to go up and tell somebody that she's Asian. So So she's kind of coming from a different lens, but same journey and same path, you know, figuring out what their community looks like and how they can support it and how they can find a way to be comfortable in their own skin. The experience for me professionally has been, I mean, gosh, you know, to be an ambassador for over 700 members for the Coca-Cola company. I mean, that's what, you know, that's an opportunity in itself. What I didn't realize is the things that you incur. Like, I was really kind of forced out of my comfort zone to, like Vivian said, find my voice. Didn't, you know, being in this role and in this position, you don't have time to sit in a corner. You're leading the pack. So I felt that this work is very value added. And I also think that in a lot of regards, it really makes you feel very empowered. So you've got kind of freedom in the space, if you will, right? To get creative, to figure out how you're going to lead the ship.
Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing those insights. I'm so happy to hear that your children are so supportive of all your ERG events. Let's hear a different version. Mark, you've said that you just recently founded your ERG. What has that experience been in for you, and how has your ERG helped your organization think about how to support your colleagues through recent events?
Yeah, thank you, Michelle. So our ERG is named Happy, Heritage of Asian American Pacific Islanders, and we just founded last year in May. You know, we kicked off during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in light of everything in 2020. It was a very successful launch, and I think ultimately it's twofold, right? Our ERG put us on the map with our organization, where, you know, we only made up, you know, Asian Americans 3% of the total employee population. And I think it's very easy from that point to really fall in that mindset. Well, we're such a small minority, you know, do we really deserve the space? Does it matter? And, you know, in that time, we were able to get our CEO, senior leadership, to address and to talk about the violence against Asian Americans that's occurred in 2020 and continued into 2021. And, you know, I think that's very important, but at the same time, we've created a space really both formal and informally for our AAPI community to not only just talk about and have our issues elevated, but to even be more casual when things happen that aren't being talked about in other meetings and other spaces with teams that may not have other Asian Americans. We have this space now where when the Atlanta shootings happened, that, you know, when no one was talking about it, people were feeling uncomfortable, that we could vent, we could discuss, you know, with ourselves what we wanted to do. And even on a more personal level, when something happens to you at work and someone, you know, we've all been there, mistakes you for the other Asian person that, you know, is on a different team, venting about that, talking, you know, informally, just because we need that support network at a company where there aren't that many of us, so we can talk and we can, you know, get through things together.
Thank you so much, and I'm so glad that you know, found the time and take advantage of the timing last year during Asian Heritage Month to start your ERG. So maybe let's kind of go reverse order and think about what is an example of an ERG taking an initiative to combat anti-Asian hate. Sue, I think we talk a little bit about a march that you organized in Atlanta in light of a recent tragic event. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm sure as many others have, it's for our BRG in particular as well. It's a very, in the beginning of this, it's just been a very heavy, exhausting time. We came together really quickly, probably record time in like 2 weeks, and probably a week and a half. And we coordinated a march, and the march was in downtown Atlanta. We started at the Coca-Cola corporate headquarters and marched down around and landed in front of our World of Coca-Cola, which also shares space with the Atlanta Aquarium as well, or the Georgia Aquarium, and then the Civil Rights Museum. So we did this march, it was the 2-week anniversary of the Atlanta shootings. We had a moment of silence for each one of the victims. And we were very fortunate that we were able to coordinate schedules kind of spontaneously, and we were able to have the CEO from the Civil Rights Museum come out and speak. So it was a very good way to kind of mentally release, right? To find your voice in a different way and kind of come together, not just as an Asian community, but there were a lot of allies that participated in the march as well. So, and to be able to kind of land in front of our landmark at the World of Coca-Cola was very special. We've also hosted a couple of Stand as One sessions, because again, you know, just wanting to make sure that people had a platform to be able to kind of speak out and share their experiences. And then we're going to continue to carry that on. You know, we're going to end up having, you know, several work sessions and series that's coming up in our Asian Heritage Month celebrations as well. So a lot of work has been done. One of the cool things that we've got coming up is that we're going to commission some artwork from local artists that are part of our that are part of families from our Asian BRG board. And we're going to create an event where we can display their artwork. So we're going to showcase local young Asian artists and create a social media opportunity in front of our World of Coke location.
Thanks, Sue. That's really cool and very powerful. Vivian, I remember you mentioning about discussions with your CEO and your head of HR recently. Can you share a little bit about that?
Certainly. I think one of the, I think the overarching story can't be told without saying that over the last 13 months or so, I think racial justice has been a steady drumbeat of a conversation at the highest levels within TIAA. And I think leadership is really important, and it plays a big role in the success of our ERG system, in particular, Engage, the Pan-Asian group. But most recently, on the 23rd of March, we did feature Roger Ferguson, our CEO, along with the head of our HR, head of our diversity groups, along in partnership with Engage ERG, in a conversation around what we can do, how we are feeling, a direct interaction on being able to address questions to our CEO and our human resources groups on what the community was feeling. But what's been really quite wonderful to see is this isn't a discrete one and done opportunity. It continues to be an engaged conversation supported by management, supported by the communities. And that kick-started a couple of other very, very strong engagements where I believe it was last week, it's all blending in, we had an opportunity to bring some subject matter experts from Emory University, from the state of North Carolina, on some of the issues specific to anti-Asian hate and the history of it. How did we get here? We're following this up with some work with the AHAA and Jin Yang in a couple of weeks, where we'll bring him back. And these events are typically very well attended. Roger Ferguson's talk attracted more than 1,000 attendees. Last week's talk attracted several hundred. So it's just an opportunity to not only get together as a community, but be heard by the highest levels of our management team.
That's great. I really like those examples and how you engaging some of the community organizations to be part of the discussion too. Mark, switching lens a little bit, right? Because I think companies sort of approach this in a different way. In addition to maybe some large events, can you give an example on how you may have some of the smaller, more intimate discussions with your ERG to articulate the challenges that your members may have been dealing with?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think similar to a lot of, folks on this call, that, our companies, our ERGs, we helped craft a statement to put out, and we shared resources, both public facing and internally facing. But we've also had opportunities to connect with our CEO and our senior leadership to really just let it all out on the table. It wasn't even just about, what's the business case for diversity or some of those topics that often come up. After the Atlanta shootings, he took the time to come to one of our general meetings and just talk to us, ask us, what do you need from me? What can I do? And offering, his immediate time and support. And I believe he was even, booked for a couple of meetings, but he, left those, decided, he needed to come to our meeting and really give us that time and space. And we were all able to, communicate to him. And I think emotions were still very raw at that time. But, really get on his radar, get on the same page, and, communicate to the company what we need. And coming out of that, we actually have a couple of great events planned for our Heritage Month to continue this conversation. But at the same time, I think the biggest event that we're really looking forward to is holding a bystander intervention training for the entire company. And this is going to be put on by Hollaback in partnership with the Asian Americans Advancing Justice Chicago chapter here locally. So we're really excited to, have this event to delve further into the history of, violence against Asian Americans in this country, and what got us to this point that led to Atlanta that's happened to 2020. And then what folks can do, what allies can do to support, because, what we've seen far too often in the videos that are shared online, there's a lot going on. There are folks being attacked, but no one is doing anything. There's so many bystanders. And, I'd like to hope that a lot of these people just don't know what to do in these situations. And we're hoping that this training can help our employees expand their knowledge and their willingness to engage and, find ways to, stop some of this violence that's happening.
Thanks, Mark. And I think that's a nice pivot to kind of talk about allyship, because, we can only do so much, and we need our allies to be there with us along the journey. So, Sue, can you talk a little bit about how allyship has influenced you and your ERG in navigating some of these challenges recently?
Yeah, so, a lot of our messaging, so for me, I'm going to give a little background for me. I've been with Coca-Cola for many, many years, and but I started while I was in college. I'm only 30, but I'm from the Midwest, from the Ohio, Michigan area, and I always tell the story. If I had $1 for every time I was referenced as chink before I got to middle school, or, I have memories of like our garage windows being shot out. So it was really definitely a racist culture before I moved to Atlanta. And I tried to remind everyone when I moved to Atlanta, I came with the goal of, working for Coca-Cola, and, just coming down to Atlanta and starting with the company, it was just a completely different experience. And that's probably, I try to remind everyone that is the place where I've probably found a lot of allyship. So, my key messages is we've got to learn to, it's an unfortunate, time. I kind of hesitate and I'm cautious because this has been a long going time, right? But we still need to not take our eye off the prize and continue to be hopeful. And the only way to do that is to have some sort of level of trust and be able to allow yourself to trust the people that are around you and be able to reach out when you do need support and you need help. So I would say, you know, for me, my personal experiences, I was young, I was in my early 20s, and my Coca-Cola family was the one that really kind of opened my eyes to kind of, you know, open it up to inclusion and start turning my ship around and developing some confidence in myself.
Thank you. And Vivian, I think you have shared with me also on how the different ERG groups come together and share a portal internally to coalesce your anti-racism efforts.
Yeah, I mean, and TIA has a wealth of ERG groups across a spectrum. I want to say there are 9 groups. But what I like to think of it as is we all go further as a group, right? You can go far alone, but you can go farther when you're together with someone else. And so I think we've leaned a lot on the experiences of some of our other ERG groups. Late last spring, early summer, with the racial just demonstrations nationwide after Mr. Floyd's murder, which I get very emotional about. That was a huge catalyst event for many of my peers who were looking to be able to come together as a community and see what we could do. Clearly, we weren't alone because of the issues that covered the entire country and the energy devoted to it. But Be the Change was a TIAA outgrowth of that particular time. The idea that one person can make a difference by understanding, by being aware, and then dialoguing, and then from there taking it into leadership and potentially ending it with some sort of action. The way the Be the Change people talked about it was it's 4 phases of really every one of us being accountable and trying to change things. And so Be the Change was an outgrowth of that period of time. And since then, with the 3,800 events of anti-Asian hate in the year that ended in February, you know, I think more and more of this portal site became around not just about the single item of the Black Lives Matter movement, but really about racial justice in general, because it is a problem in America. And so using that portal as a jumping off point, as kind of a list of things that we as ERGs can do to communicate to our members, and then to ally together as a group to see how we can all come in and be the change together while, you know, facilitating and educating our own constituents.
I think that's really powerful. And, you know, I know, Mark, you and I have had this conversation and you mentioned I Holler Back. Any additional tip about how you want to potentially educate some of our colleagues on how to be more effective allies?
Yeah, no, I think that's a fantastic question, something that always comes up to me when I speak with other ERG leaders or other folks that are involved in ERGs, is that we're juggling a lot, with our actual day job, with the ERG work that we're doing, with our personal lives and everything else that comes with it, that there's a lot going on. And I think it's tough, right? Like we're here, we're not looking to necessarily, get a lot of praise for the work we do. We do it because it's the right thing to do. We truly believe in it. So I think like something very simple to do is validate the work that we're doing, the time and the effort that's being put in, attend the events, encourage other members to attend, volunteer to help, amplify these events. But at the same time, post these events outside of that, I think we all need time to process the racial trauma that we're seeing, that we're experiencing. So whether it's us showing up 10, 15 minutes late to a meeting and empowering us. Take the time you need to come together buttoned up. If you're unable to show up completely 100%, that's okay. Like, I think there needs to be that standard and that willingness to let us kind of process and have our time. Because so often, you know, I even found myself during the week of the Atlanta shooting to just, I knew I needed time to just take a break, and whether it was a lunch or an hour, but I couldn't. I kept pushing myself, like, I don't want to let things fall through. You know, I need to make sure, you know, this marketing campaign, you know, happens. And, you know, there's so much pressure to, you know, stay buttoned up. I think we need to empower each other to say, it's okay. You know, we have to have that time for ourselves, and if something has to fall through, I think our allies, our company, our leaders have to be okay with that. You know, we are human at the end of the day, and we need that time and space.
Thank you. That really resonated with me. It's one of the reasons why I ended up writing some articles, was because this topic was so tough for me to go through. And a lot of times I would just do these calls with people, and some of these calls are nothing more than two people on a screen, and we just sit in silence, because that's what it feels like. It's how heavy some of these topics have impacted me. And so wanted to talk a little bit about the intersectionality of shared experiences experienced by minority. And Vivian, I think you kind of said it a little bit about how the different ERG groups kind of come together when it comes to the issue of racial justice or equity. Can you talk a little bit more about how you do that in your company?
I took myself off mute. Absolutely. I think a big part of it is that we have a single calendar that is managed by our diversity and inclusion team that does try to manage all of our events. And we share our events with our ERG peers. Because sometimes, as an example, several months ago, career development, did a series on career development. That's not limited to our group only. It's the resource has been organized, so we invite other people to come. And I think that the more we can do by making sure that we are sharing our opportunities and identifying that we are all experiencing shared events, even if the specific hate actions are different from one another, acknowledging that we're going through similar emotions and trying to find and leverage this into an opportunity to create change. Again, I'm a big believer in going together, going further together, and partnering and leveraging and growing, because you can't get ignored when you're operating as a group. And that has been, you know, a shout out to your amazing pieces that I read on LinkedIn, Michelle. We can be relegated to an insignificant statistical group if in fact we don't come together as a group and leverage our partners and our allies and create a story that is worth it to others to change. So.
Thank you, Vivian. And that reference there for everybody is the congressional testimony of Daniel Day Kim that he gave on March 18th, specifically on anti-Asian hate topic. And he was asking pollsters during the recent election as to why he doesn't often see Asian American break out into a separate group. And the people that he asked simply look him in the eye and say, because Asian Americans are considered statistically insignificant for polls. And so it really resonated with me when I think about some of the words about feeling invisible, feeling ignored that you share in the beginning of this panel. I have one more question for each. Sue, and Mark, and then I think we're going to go into Q&A. So for the audience, I want you to start thinking about your questions. Mark, you gave me a few examples in our prep call to talk about how you celebrate cultures together and the infusion of different cultures that help foster allyship and intersectionality. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think we're very lucky to have a committed and hardworking D&I group that actually schedules regular time for all the ERGs to meet and discuss what's going on, areas that where we can collaborate. And there's already been some, fruits of that labor. We recently had a holy event with our LGBTQ ERG. That was a lot of fun. And we even have a Cinco de Mayo event coming up talking about the intersection of food, Asian fusion, Asian and Latin cuisines. And then we even have a Memorial Day event with our Veterans Network group talking about some of the brave men and women that have served that were Asian American. So I think there's a lot of intersections. There's a lot that actually, we share. And I think more often than not, we sometimes get caught in this bubble of, well, I want to promote like my community, my events, this is our budget. But I think when we come together, we pool our budget, bigger budget, more attendees, we get more attention from, folks and employees at large. So I think ultimately it's something very, worthwhile and something that we should all, continue to look into.
Thank you. I think those are all great tips for all the ERG leaders on this line to think about how you do join events and celebrate a different culture and heritage of different groups. Sue, before this panel, we showed the Ad Council advertisement, which was really, really powerful, at least for me. What are your thoughts in terms of how we amplify our messages, be it across company or across industries?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. We're very similar in some of our best practices as a BRG with, the shared calendar and shared events internally. And we've done this in the past, but we've always been very welcoming of sharing events with other corporate companies and other Asian BRGs as well. So we try to cross-pollinate in that regard as well. I think it's time, right? I mean, to be quite honest, it's past time. We really need to come together as a community to really leverage our voices. We've got to take the risk, and we got to put the perfection aside. It's not going to be perfect. We've got to learn to find a way to trust our allies, trust the community, and just understand that it just starts with the first step. Just take the first step. It's going to be awkward and funny, but I promise you, just like a baby learning how to walk, might be a little bit wobbly the first go around, but once you get that second one and you get going, army crawl in the beginning if you have to. But I think the biggest thing to remember is from that ad, it really resonates for me as well, because we are so much more than a lot of this unconscious bias and all these stereotypes. So at the end of the day, I know everybody's feeling the heaviness and they're on the front line kind of taking the mud shots, but just remember, we are so much more than that. So, I would just say it's past time. We've got to find our voice. You've got allies, you've got a strong community, reach out for help. And, we've got to put our names out there.
Thank you. And now I want to open the floor and take a couple of questions from the audience. So either take yourself up. Yeah, I see something coming. Are there any specific resources that you would recommend to give more context on the Asian history and culture for allies? Anyone want to take it?
Well, I have one, but not on my fingertips. So I'll try to find it while we're talking, and I'll drop it in the chat if that works.
Fantastic. The one that I would go ahead, Vivian. You go first.
Oh, I was gonna say, and I can try to find the information and circulate it later. But Chris Saw, his last name is S-U-H. from Emory University was on our Engage ERG call last week talking about how did we get here. And I thought it was like taking a crash course in our history, which I liked to think I knew a little bit about, but it was just so interesting. And so I don't know, because I wasn't the one to coordinate it, how we got him, but it was worth doing some research, and I'll share that with Ascend afterwards. But
Fantastic.
Chris from Emory.
Fantastic. And I see a number of people, myself included, have put in a link to the PBS documentary series called Asian Americans. It was published last year during Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And I watched all 5 episodes of it. They're all still on my DVR, and I still use that to help me think through some of these challenges and give me the context. Mark, what do you have for us?
I actually put a link into the chat. It's a card link with multiple links and resources, both for people to donate, to get more history, I think, like we mentioned. But yeah, I love that PBS special, and I think it's actually free right now on PBS, just in light of everything that's going on.
It is free until June 1st. So throughout Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, I think some of the ERGs, mine included, will use some of the episodes to foster discussion among our ERG members and allies. So it's a great resource to use. One more question from the audience. Mark mentioned letting people take their time to deal with challenges. How do we communicate that need, Mark? And maybe I'll ask Sue and Vivian to chime in after.
Yeah, so I think, part of it is, I understand every company's at a different place on, what we call the D&I journey, right? I think with Ferrara, I'm fortunate and blessed that to work with leaders that are very much just understanding, and they know that they don't have the experience, they don't have the history that we all have of some of the trauma that we've experienced, but they're here to listen and they're here to be compassionate and they want to do something. And every time that they ask, what can we do? What can I provide? I always say that, actions, money, those things speak louder than a corporate statement any day of the week. And getting folks to understand that at a human level, being able to share personally kind of what you've gone through, like why you're hurting, I think has helped open up that discussion, that door to why I need this time. And I think you really have to, it's unfortunate, but I think sometimes you really just have to tap into that the humanity in people to get to that point. We're just not at the point, in society where people can just, oh yes, we understand everything that you're going through right now. We've got the history. I think we're all learning, but to get everyone up to speed, I think you just really have to tap into that humanity and get folks to, be on board and understand, this is why I need this time.
That's a great tip. And so one more final tip from Sue and then Vivian to wrap us up.
Yep. So look, the reality is this is a journey, right? So this isn't going to be a one and done. Again, just like what Mark had mentioned, there's several ways. When folks are ready, we want to make sure we've got to take care of associates first, to understand, make sure that they've got a place to have a voice if they need to. But also too, we've done a lot of matching programs and things of that nature with the AAJC, the Asian American Advancing Justice Organization that we mentioned earlier. We've got 2 or 3 others that the company is. So we want to make sure if associates have a broad, diverse playbook, if you will, of leaning in and trying to contribute in their own way, whatever they're most comfortable with.
Thank you. And to bring us home, Vivian, what is your final tip?
My final tip is along the orders of what I've been talking about, which is creating allyship. I encourage everyone here to not only join your own company or found your own ERG, but make yourself available to others by joining their ERGs. Because when you've got this reciprocity, it becomes, again, a bigger conversation, not about what's in it for me, it's about what's in it for all of us. And I'll end that.
Thank you. No, that was really powerful. And so I want to ask everybody to join me in sharing your appreciation for all our panelists today, for Vivian, for Sue, and for Mark. Really love having you, and also appreciate all the resources and insight that you've shared with all of us. And with that, I'm going to transition us to our next part, which is a facilitated conversation. And the first facilitator will be our friend, Rush Reese.
Hey there, everyone, and thank you, Michelle. And I just wanted to first say thank you to Ascend for putting this on. This is really, really an important conversation, but also very timely. And so I just also want to thank all the panelists, Sue and Vivian and Mark. You guys have been so authentic and transparent today, and I think that's so important to being able to really engage in these conversations and go deeper. So what I'm going to talk to everyone about today, and what I don't want to do all the talking, I actually want to hear from you all too, is just about finding your voice and allyship. So one of the things that I was thinking about as I was reflecting on this topic, actually our talented moderator and accomplished author, Michelle, has put out a lot of important and relevant material, including the LinkedIn article that they referenced earlier. And in that article on finding and amplifying your voice and through allyship, there was a reference to the definition of allyship by the Anti-Oppression Network. And that definition, it really just kind of stuck with me. I found myself noodling on it and going back to it. And thinking, what does that mean from my journey, my personal journey, as well as I think about all of those in the Asian community who have been impacted and are on various stages of the journey as well. And so it was just important for me to think about allyship. I want to read that actual definition. Allyship is an active, consistent, and arduous practice of unlearning and re-evaluating, in which a person in a position of privilege and power seeks to operate in solidarity with a marginalized group. I found that allyship really is about intersectionality. We're more than one identity. And it's through that cross-section in each of us that we learn to really support each other in a great way. So I think that allyship is just so much. You can learn to find your voice through it by really learning from others. You can almost catapult your experience and your journey through your allies. If you think about other movements, whether it's the women's movement or the civil rights movement or the countless movements before, many of your allies have found their voice through those movements. And there are things that can be used to really help find your own. I have three probably key areas that I think about when I think about allyship and how that gets you to your voice, because finding your voice it's weird. It's not just your voice, right? It's not the talking part. So the first piece of that is the awareness component. And when I think of awareness, some folks think awareness is just like an easy way to, do nothing. But I actually find that awareness is such an active step. It is such an action. Awareness requires that you may need to unlearn some things about how you've been taught or what you believe. You actually may need to start to model the very behaviors and values that you're looking for others to acknowledge and demonstrate. And so there's this lead by example that comes with that self-awareness. And then it really kind of puts you in a spot where you say, okay, I'm self-aware now. So now I know how I feel about the issues my community is facing. Now, not only do I know how I feel about it, I also know what I'm willing to do to change in myself before asking for change in others. That part is so actionable. Sometimes just spending time in that awareness with yourself just is very insightful and brings you further in your journey. But after the awareness, the second step that I've always kind of felt is just as pertinent. So all of what was put in the chat really comes to mind is education. If you're going to unlearn something, what are you going to replace that with? And doing your research, actually studying and understanding the history and the issues and the concerns, and really getting, and I hate to use this word because it's been overused lately, but facts, right? And so I know that social media comments can sometimes be supplemented for facts. And when you're starting this journey and you've had to unlearn some things, sometimes it does also take a lot of education to really get yourself to a place where you feel armed with knowledge to be able to make change. And then last is that activate. What are the action steps and in finding your voice? And how do you use your allies when you're ready to do those action steps in addition to your awareness education? In that space, volunteerism is a way to really just kind of get into the community. And the community can almost tell you where they need you to bring awareness or bring support. And you don't necessarily have to try to figure it out on your own. So volunteerism and getting involved with the community organizations is always key. I think Mark and some of the others have mentioned these next two, which is, the voting. Another step is knowing where your leaders stand on the issues to your community and who is driving change, positive change for your community, and focusing your efforts not only in your voting, but your financial resources. Follow the money. Your financial resources does drive and impact your community. So do you know where the leaders or the businesses that you're supporting with your financial resources, do you know where they stand with your community? Do you know whether they actually reciprocate that support on those issues? And then last, I think with allies, it's always important to know that in amplifying your voice with allies, comparisons to other groups, they can be taken two ways, right? They can help you to get to collaboration and benefit, or you can create a tone of competition. And so I've always, even in Path as leader of the Black Professional Network of TIAA, it's always been really important to really monitor the tone of the comparison and always understand, what's my goal with this comparison? Am I looking to collaborate and further progress, or is this comparison going to divide? And the lack of unity, we know, as the panelists have already commented, that individually is a lot harder than together. And so comparisons are always a key with when you're finding your voice and you're finding your allies. Activate your allies in a way that's going to bring unity and collaboration. And then know that it's not a one size fits all. Everyone in your community is going to be starting at different points in the journey, but your allies are also at different points of the journey. And so the thought here is that you can match your allies who are strong at different points of the journey. And it's not one ally fits all. You may use one ally at this part of the journey, and another ally in the middle, and another ally in the end. And again, you're not really one and done. There isn't this date, right, that we've arrived. It is a long process. It is an arduous, it is definitely a challenging process. And having multiple allies on your team is crucial to making change. And so letting your allies come in and help you wherever they are and wherever you are, and know that it's an iterative process, is great activism for the journey. So with that, that's kind of my reflections, Michelle. I'll actually turn it over to you for comments from the audience or the panel.
No, thank you. No, I think you share some really incredible tips and wisdom, and I really appreciate how generous you are with those, and it actually inspire a lot of our people to share many different resources also in the chat window. So I really appreciate you doing that. And I am now going to invite our next facilitator to join us, Alpa. Would you please join us? Hi, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Alpa Sutaria, and I'm with the Coca-Cola Company. My day job is that I lead our sustainability work for our business in North America, but I'm also the chair currently of our Multicultural Leadership Council. I work with Sue Gilbert, that you heard from earlier today, and a number of other leaders across the organization on trying to drive better progress around equity and inclusion within our company. And of course, we've been, very concerned and participating in a lot of conversations around what's happening in the world outside of our company as well. So I'm here to talk a little bit with you and hear some of your thoughts around how do we take this conversation beyond dialogue. This entire session was really about going from dialogue to awareness, as Resh described so well, and the different things that we can do to create our own awareness and awareness around us, to action as an ally. So I have a couple of questions that I'd like to entertain with the group today. First, let's start with the personal bit. I know many of us have been in these situations throughout our lives, but definitely recently as well. How have you felt when you've been in a situation in the moment of having to say something or stand up for someone who is somehow being marginalized, or potentially even finding yourself in an aggressive situation? What is that situation like for you? And I'd love to hear from members of the audience if you'd like to share. Don't know if there are any brave volunteers.
Yeah, and if you'd like to volunteer, please use under the reaction tab and raise your hand, or we can. Yes. Larry is asking a repeat of the question, please, Alpa.
Yes, absolutely. So my question is, have you found yourself in a situation recently where either in the moment you have felt that you needed to say something to either, address a situation where someone was potentially marginalizing you, or that you needed to stand up for someone who was being marginalized in your presence? How did that feel? I see, Joe, you have your hand up. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi, hello. Appreciate the opportunity to attend this, by the way, and appreciate all the input from the speakers. It's been valuable for me. Just quick story. So I'm married to, my wife was born in Japan. We have 2 kids, so obviously they're of mixed race. So I think this is the first time, I guess, I'm personally, I guess, feeling connection to marginalized sections of our society. And I'm a little ashamed to admit that, frankly, that I haven't been, more aware and more involved historically, but try not to look backwards, so looking for ways to be, productive and move forward and do my part to be an ally. So I've been lucky that I haven't witnessed anything personally in front of me, but my wife did have an incident at a grocery store where somebody was just extremely rude to her and didn't think she spoke English, and my reaction was anger and frustration and not being able to do anything in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I want to learn how to get away from that. The anger, it's not going to affect anything, obviously, aside from some physical altercation taking place in front of me. That's not, going to be productive. So that's where I want to be better and skill build for myself, just in how to support my wife and make her feel, that she's cared for, and it's not something, I'm turning a blind eye from, but not being able to have ever experienced that or likely to ever experience that myself directly. So just sharing my, I guess, experience with it here recently, and I'm not alone in that, and I hope there's more folks like me that are looking for opportunities to become more directly involved.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Joe. And I think, first of all, I appreciate the kind of personal example, the feeling that you describe, I think, is so similar to one that so many of us have. When something is happening right there in the moment, you're not quite sure sometimes what to say or what to do or how to respond in a way that is helpful and not going to potentially escalate the problem. So a question also for others potentially in the audience. What could potentially help you overcome a barrier like that? What sort of activity, education, training might be helpful for you? Any volunteers?
Alpa, if you don't have somebody immediately, Sarah Dow actually had raised her hand for the last question. If you can.
Well, we'd love to hear from you, Sarah.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. Just to start and offer a little bit of background, I'm Vietnamese American. I was born here in the States and my parents and grandparents were refugees. I live in a community that is predominantly or has a large Vietnamese community there. So personally, I did not feel as concerned for my own or my parents' safety at the height of a lot of the hate crimes that were happening. And then lo and behold, a couple days later, down the street, something happened. So there is no safe space, I guess, where we are safe to be away from all of that. Though this is a safe space to converse about that. But to your question, my reaction is always, I get flustered. I get a combination of anger. I get a combination of how do I respond? How do I share that this is not okay, but also share something that is supportive and helpful for the situation without just aggravating and making the situation worse. So to address your second question, personally for me, something that I try to do when I have the emotional energy to do is walk through these conversations in my head. If someone said something, how would I best respond in a way that I'm able to share that's inappropriate, but also something that's helpful.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that practicing of what could a scenario look like, what would I say, how would I feel about it, is so helpful. And I think some of the training that many have referenced in the chat could potentially be sources of training or just practice that we could put in motion. Also would suggest that in your BRGs or even among your friends, just role-playing some of those scenarios would be very, very helpful. I know of several companies out there over the years that have established allyship training that is essentially basically that they will go and identify a number of scenarios and have people work together in small groups to actually walk through and role play exactly what would happen in that situation and how to handle different types of outcomes. That can help us become a little bit more comfortable. And I know I'm almost on at time to transition, Michelle, so I'll look at you. Would you like to transition to the next facilitator?
Thank you, Alpa. I really appreciate you facilitating these discussions and sharing tips and resources. Now I'd like to invite Jing to be our final facilitator for today. Jing?
Hi, can you see me now?
I can. You look beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Please remind me when the time is near the end, because I don't.
You're about 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So let me introduce myself first. My name is Jin Yang. I'm currently the full-time lead for Pan-Asian Network at Bristol Myers Squibb, which is unusual. Now I'm full-time. So before I took this role, I was a scientist leading drug discovery for cardiovascular. And I've been at BMS for 14 years now. So for this session, what we are talking about is finding your voice and focusing on educating the workforce as well as educating the leadership on bias as well as discriminations. So this is a topic actually I feel pretty strongly, especially from how I grew up, and now I'm taking on the leadership role for the Pan-Asian Network. So let me start from who I am. I grew up in China, and I came to the US for PhD. And then I've been going through the academic training and came to industry. So it has been a pretty typical first generation immigrant. So early on in my career, it was all about the career. And the concept about discrimination was not even in my mind when I first came to the US. I came from a homogeneous society and came here, and American was all the American dream, right? So it didn't even hit me until probably well into my career, where I start to see the bamboo ceiling and start to recognize my personal role. What should I do for the community besides just my own career? And that's one of the driver I became very active in the Pan-Asian Network, then taking on the leadership role. And recently, especially after Atlanta shooting, it really hit me a lot on how individually as Asian Americans, what is our role in a corporation to really elevate and amplify our voice and help our own company to evolve and support our Asian colleagues, as well as provide support to the whole community. And the more I think about it, the more I get into the action, I feel so much stronger. It's really up to us. And we can make a huge difference. So I think about the reaction to Atlanta shooting in our company. We actually, on Tuesday, when the shooting happens, so I started to talking to our corporate communication to start to let them know there are things going on so badly, we have to do something. And lo and behold, the shooting happens, and immediately we were talking about how are we going to respond. So we had the CEO, we actually helped our CEO craft the statement inside the company as well as outside the company, denouncing the violence, really call for actions. And inside the company at the time, and I really sense a lot of anxiety, angers, and there are people really are not able to concentrate. So we actually immediately speaking to the leaders, and all the leadership members, I have personally wrote to them, let them aware what's going on. And immediately we get such a strong response from the leaders. We had open conversation with our CEO, with our different function leaders, just have our Asian colleagues to come speak to the leaders and share their experiences. It was extremely powerful when the emotion was raw, being able to express your feeling with your leaders and hear the leadership support was tremendously helpful for the community.
Thank you, Jing. I think you are so right on about voicing your own experiences and sharing your background. And so I appreciate your courage, and I appreciate you reaching out to your leadership team, because that is a great role model for many of us on this call today to continue on this important work. Thank you.
Well, as a PPHG leader, I think it's our job to help energize the team, right? So we organize all company-wide sharing experience we call Asian Voices. We educate organization. We had the PBS film series education program starting from there. And now we have company-wide Asian Voices for employees to share. And now we are opening that conversation. And the way I feel like for us to disrupt the unconscious bias, we have to have continuous conversation. We have to have that open safety environment to encourage people to share. So it's important for us to engage the company and engage the leaders.
Thank you. No, I think you have ended us on a really great note on the importance of creating these spaces to continue our dialogue. Thank you, Jing, for being here today.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Yeah.
And so what I want to make sure that we wrap up on is the importance of following our role models today, all the panelists, all our facilitators, and the importance of calling to action. If you're an ERG leader, certainly you have a group of people that you can lead. If you're an ally, please reach out to your ERG leaders and let them know what you can do. And in addition to your individual work and your individual company, certainly would ask you to join the call to action with Ascent. If you're not a member yet, visit ascentleadership.org to learn more about the benefits and the different ways that you can sign up to become a member today, and that you can learn about the different programs that we offer for the entire career cycle, from entry-level professionals all the way to those who may be looking to finish up their career and join corporate boards and everything in between. And I hope that you can advocate for Ascent within your organization and encourage your ERG to get involved. I myself am a lifetime member, and our Pan-Asian Professional Network at EY has done a lot with Ascent over the years, and we're so appreciative of that collaboration. We mentioned about the 5-point action agenda at the early onset of this call. So please share that with your company. And if your company is not one of the 110 organizations advocating that action agenda, I would encourage you to consider asking your companies to join so that they can amplify key messages and insight from this forum and other events. And folks have asked about whether we'll share deck and recording of our session today, and the answer is yes. So feel free to use those and ask your companies to help us amplify key messages from Ascent and join our call to action. Next slide, please. So what will happen next? We love your feedback, and certainly you have not been shy in sharing that in the chat window. Keep those coming. You will be asked also to complete a short survey so that you can let us know whether programming like this or other programming may suit your need, and we will share the recording of this event, the deck, and some of these key insights and resources that everybody has been so generous to offer to us. And you may have also shared with us that there are toolkits or guides and best practices that your ERG may have shared. You may also be contacted by an Ascent team member to see if we may share those more broadly. And if you like to do that, then the Ascent team member can let you know what are the next steps for us to help us amplify those messages. One more slide. These are the websites as well as the social media handle. We really hope that you had a chance to share your feedback as well as your reaction to some of the things that all our panelists have shared today. I really want to thank the Ascent team and specifically Robina, Mike, Shamita on organizing us on the production front. I'd like to thank my panelists, Mark, Sue, Vivian for being on our panel, and our facilitators, Rash, Jing, and Elpa. Thank you so much for making time today. I really appreciate all of you for being here. It gives me hope and courage for us to keep going on our collective journey to stop Asian hate and also collectively stop bias and racism of all forms for our country and for our world. Let's ascend together. Thank you so much.